This is something that happened to a friend of mine named Jing Ping Biazai. He usually had a strange hobby, which was going up to the roof in the middle of the night and using binoculars to observe the city he lived in. He liked looking at the quiet streets late at night, which were different from their usual daytime appearance. Being able to look at the large water tower in the distance, taxis carrying drunkards up the hill, and Salita Riley standing vending machines in the middle of the night. Quietly observing the movements of this city made him feel very happy. On the west side of Biazai's house, there was a long slope. That slope came straight down towards where he lived, so looking west from the roof, he could see the entire condition of the slope. That day, he was using his binoculars to look at that solitary vending machine on the slope. He thought to himself that there was a huge moth flying around it. At that moment, he noticed something moving down from the very top of the slope at an astonishing speed. Seeing that shadow, he wondered what it was, so he took a look through his binoculars. Through the binoculars, he saw a completely naked, emaciated child. He stood there with a face full of smiles, waving at him, and then ran rapidly towards him. That thing had obviously noticed his presence and was making eye contact with him. He was slightly startled and looked again. As that thing ran quickly from the slope, it kept looking at him, smiling and waving. He felt terrified and thought this situation was a bit bad, so he hurriedly ran down the stairs and hid inside his house. He quickly closed and locked the door, wondering what that thing was. Just as he was falling into a whirlpool of fear, he heard a pitter-patter sound. It was the sound of footsteps of someone running quickly up the stairs towards the roof. It was obvious that the owner of those footsteps was looking for Biazai, who had just been on the roof. He muttered to himself in worry, "Oh no, no, what should I do? What should I do? What on earth was that thing?" He was too scared to make a sound. He stood right in the middle of the living room, gripping an iron with both hands to defend himself. After a while, the sound of someone coming downstairs was heard again. He was trembling all over, so scared that his heart almost jumped out of his chest. Suddenly, violent knocking on the door and the doorbell rang out. The door handle turned rapidly, and he could hear the guy outside making strange moaning sounds. He instantly held his breath, his heart pounding violently, his whole body trembling incessantly. After about 10 seconds, the knocking and the doorbell stopped, and the original quiet state was restored. Even so, B.A.'s eyes' tension still could not be dispelled. He stared stiffly at the door until the sun came up. After that terrifying experience, B.A.'s eye never dared to look around with his binoculars in the middle of the night again. To this day, whenever he recalls this incident, he always wonders, what exactly was that guy? I am still not entirely sure if this counts as a supernatural experience, but it was certainly an unbelievable one. That was about 15 years ago. I lived in Kato City, Hyogo Prefecture. Because I really liked foraging for wild vegetables, I had a habit of making buns out of the wild vegetables I gathered. My friends jokingly called this behavior my bun habit. So every spring, I would go into the mountains to forage for wild vegetables. One must leave the hiking trails and walk through pathless all grass to find them. That day, I prepared for a bun habit trip and went to a place I had visited a few times to pick wild vegetables. As soon as I entered the woods, there were beautiful wild vegetables and some mushrooms everywhere. Before I knew it, I was completely absorbed in it. After a while, feeling a bit tired, I took a sip of water and looked at today's harvest. I thought happily to myself, "I'm so glad I came. The harvest is great." After resting for a bit, I looked at my watch. It was already 4 p.m. It was about time. I prepared to go back, completely satisfied. However, on the way back, I realized I had lost my sense of direction. Groping for a general direction, I started climbing towards the ridge, but no matter how I walked, it was scenery I had never seen before. I muttered to myself, "Oh man, this situation seems a bit bad." Right at that moment, about 30 meters ahead on the high ground, a human figure flashed from left to right in the bushes. Because it was in a dense forest, I couldn't see the figures clearly, However, it seemed to be a group of 3 middle-aged men. I felt as if they were walking while talking and laughing. Although I couldn't hear the contents of their conversation, I could clearly hear their laughter. Great. Maybe that's the hiking trail. Thinking this, I crawled towards their direction. When I arrived at the place where they had just been and took a look, I almost fell down, because it was a steep cliff where no human could walk. In an instant, a chill ran down my spine. I thought to myself, this is not good, because I had climbed up a slope. To adjust my breathing and calm down, I took several deep breaths. Looking up at the sky through the miscellaneous trees, I confirmed the position of the sun and thus knew the direction. After that, I walked along the northern slope of that mountain for a while before successfully reaching the hiking trail. Upon reaching the trail, although I breathed a sigh of relief, the sky was getting dark. I looked back at the place I had just walked, and then the loud laughter of 3 middle-aged men came from the bushes in the distance. I was so scared that I hurried away. Later, I safely made it down the mountain before dark, although I don't really know what that was. Those laughs linger in my ears to this day, impossible to shake off. What exactly did I encounter that day? My father used to be a sailor and had worked on many cargo ships. Because of the nature of his work at sea, I rarely saw him when I was young. However, thanks to his experiences, every time he came back he would tell us what he had seen and heard. I really loved his stories back then. They were truly fascinating. When I was little, I heard a story from him. He said that on the ship he was on at the time, the crew didn't have their own private rooms, so he had a roommate. Not long after the ship my father was on set sail, someone committed suicide on board. The person who took his own life was that very roommate who slept in the top bunk. In some corner of the ship, he slashed himself with a knife and died. There was blood everywhere. After his roommate was discovered, my father and a few other crew members were ordered to clean up the scene together. He said that when they lifted the body, he felt it was very light. You could say that the person had bled dry, which was why he was so light. Recalling that roommate, he was a very meticulous and earnest person, the kind of guy who would diligently stand watch even when he had a cold. Therefore, not long after his roommate died, strange things began to happen in their room. My father would often hear someone getting down from the top bunk in the middle of the night, followed by the sound of footsteps, a door opening, and someone walking out of the room, as if he were still going on duty. Or halfway through his sleep in the middle of the night, he would sometimes feel someone climbing into the top bunk to sleep. With a look of terror on his face, my father told me that he was actually quite scared at the time and didn't even dare to open his eyes to look. Confused, I asked my father why his roommate committed suicide. My father sighed helplessly and said that he had previously heard his roommate mention his wife seemed to be having an affair, which brought him great pain. This seemed to be the reason that broke his roommate. Being a sailor pays well, but it's also very tough work. Being away from family for long periods means both the sailors and their families have to endure loneliness. Later, out of curiosity, I asked how they handled the corpse on the ship back then. My father recalled for a moment and told me that after holding a small ceremony for him on the ship, the captain received orders and just buried him directly at sea, although the company's policy was to try and freeze the body until they docked, process it, and ship the employee back home to Japan. The ship had just set sail. It was absolutely impossible to freeze him until they reached the nearest port, let alone return to Japan. So, with no other choice, they had to give him a burial at sea in international waters. After I grew up, I remembered this incident and looked it up online recently. According to Article 15 of the Japanese Mariners Act, when someone dies on board while a vessel is underway, the captain can order a burial at sea. The conditions for a sea burial are that the ship must be in international waters, 24 hours must have passed since the death, photographs must be taken, hair and personal belongings must be kept, and certain measures must be taken to prevent the body from floating to the surface. It seems that in unavoidable circumstances, burying a colleague at sea really does happen, and I imagine making such a decision must be incredibly heavy. So I went to ask my father out of curiosity about that roommate again. I asked him if he had encountered his roommate's ghost in the room after that. My father thought for a moment and then said, looking completely unfazed, that he lived with that ghost roommate for a while longer, though he forgot exactly how long. Anyway, if he was sleeping in the room in the middle of the night, he would hear him crying. Sometimes, when he opened his eyes, he would see him right in front of him, looking completely soaked with a rotting face, and he would fiercely warn him, "Never die at sea, or else you won't be able to go home." My father looked at me, smiled, and said, "Good thing I didn't die at sea, right?" But because of that experience, he would often warn the newly hired juniors, telling them not to be careless and die on the ship. Because if you die, your soul and body might not be able to return home. A few years ago, when I was still a college student, a senior introduced me to a night shift job at a small clinic. The duties were to patrol the clinic once and answer the phone. After that, I just had to stay until morning and could do whatever I wanted. It was a dream part-time job with no one micromanaging me. The clinic had 3 floors in total. The first floor had a reception room, a waiting room, and consultation rooms. The second floor had an office, a meeting room, and a kitchen. And the third floor was the duty room. The duty room was a Japanese-style room. There was only one staircase. Although it was a small clinic, it was fully equipped. The entire clinic was secured by a security system from a certain security company. The general flow of the night shift was after arriving at the clinic at 9 o'clock. Since the main entrance was completely locked at 7:30. I would disarm the security system from outside the back door, go inside and patrol the clinic once, and then head to the duty room on the 3rd floor. There was a security company control panel in the duty room. Upon entering, I would set the security system back to armed mode. The 1st and 2nd floors were almost entirely covered with security sensors, but there were none in the duty room, so I could move freely inside it. The control panel had indicator lights. It would show a green light when there were no abnormalities. If a sensor detected something, the light would turn red, and it would automatically contact the security company and the clinic director. If a door or window was opened, an alarm would go off. Once I was in the room and switched it to armed mode, as long as there were no phone calls, I could do whatever I wanted. To be honest, I only ever received a midnight phone call once, so after patrolling, I always just watched TV in the duty room and enjoyed myself doing whatever I pleased. One night, I completed my patrol as usual, went into the duty room, and set the security system to armed mode. Then I turned on the TV, a tub and toe I bought from the convenience store, and read a book before slouching over the desk, feeling drowsy and wanting to sleep. At this time, the television program had just ended and went into a commercial break. I accidentally glanced at the security control panel and couldn't believe my eyes. The light was actually glowing red. Up until now, I had never encountered a situation where the red light came on. Could someone else still be here? Then the red light turned green. I thought about it carefully. It was impossible for anyone to be in the clinic. If the director or other doctors returned to the clinic for an emergency, they would first deactivate the security system from the panel outside the back door. If it were an intruder, the alarm would sound immediately the moment a window or door was opened. I thought to myself, maybe it was a malfunction, because if the red light really came on, the security company would have to contact the director first, and then call the duty room. But there were no phone calls at all, which meant it must be a malfunction. While thinking this, I kept staring at the panel, and the green light strongly illuminated my heart. But the next instant, I froze, because the red light came on again, and this time it didn't disappear. There was definitely someone or something in the clinic. I fell into a terrifying delusion, thinking that some inexplicable thing was walking towards this duty room. I hurriedly called the director. After ringing a few times, she picked up the phone. The director asked me what was wrong. I told her that the security system's red light was on. The director was a bit surprised because she hadn't received any notification from the security company. I told the director that it had lit up once before and immediately turned green, but this time it stayed on. The director said, "Understood. I will have the security company confirm it right away. Wait a moment, and I will get back to you." Hearing the director's words made me feel a little more at ease. However, the red light was still on, and my fear could not be erased. About 2 minutes later, the director called me back. She had checked with the security company, and they showed no abnormal reports. I was astonished. How could that be? The red light was on right here. What should I do? The director said, "All right, I will come over and take a look now. Wait for me there." After hanging up with the director, I genuinely felt that she was a very reliable person. The red light was still glaring, but I didn't hear any sounds, nor did I feel any movement inside the clinic. I gradually began to relax. After a while, I heard the sound of a car, and also footsteps near the clinic. From the window on the 3rd floor, I couldn't see the front and back doors, but I could see the path leading from the front door to the back. I looked and saw it was the director. She was holding a flashlight and walking towards the back door. I stared at the director until she was out of sight. A few seconds later, the security system's alert status was turned off. The director had deactivated the security mode from outside the back door. I just wanted to meet up with the director as soon as possible, so I slid open the door and stepped out into the hallway. The moment I stepped into the hallway, I felt something was wrong. A very fishy smell hit my nose, and the whole space was filled with an indescribably foul odor. Suddenly, fear welled up in my heart again, but I had definitely just seen the director walking this way, and she must be on the 1st floor, so I turned on the hallway lights and walked towards the stairs. Looking down from the 3rd floor, you can see all the way to the bottom of the 1st floor from the clinic's staircase. I went to the stairs and looked down at the 1st floor. The lights on the 1st floor were not on, and I felt that the fishy stench had grown stronger. I thought to myself, why didn't the director turn on the lights? Hadn't she already come in? As the smell became even more unbearable, a strange sound suddenly came from deep within the 1st floor hallway. The sound was like singing, yet also like chanting scriptures. This made me feel exceptionally terrified. I began to doubt that it was the director on the 1st floor. My mind was in complete chaos, and my entire body broke out in a cold sweat, but I couldn't take my eyes off the 1st floor. At this time, the smell grew heavier, and the humming voice became louder. Something was walking towards the stairs. My brain was frantically issuing commands to run away, but my body didn't dare to move a single inch. I saw the humming thing. It was nearly 2 meters tall, and its entire body was flesh-colored, or rather, close to white. It had no clothes or hair on its body, and it was completely slimy. Its arms and legs were abnormally long. It contorted all the joints in its body and then moved slowly. While humming that chanting song, it walked to the bottom of the 1st stairs and then began to climb up. What was that thing? I have to escape quickly. I have to escape. Although I thought this, my body, as if paralyzed by the crisis, couldn't move at all. When it reached the landing between the 1st and 2nd floors, the cell phone I had left in the duty room rang. Upon hearing the sound, the thing instantly stopped moving, then raised its head and turned towards the 3rd floor. I locked eyes with that thing. Its strange eyeballs were rolling around wildly. That guy grinned at me and let out a dark laughter. Its smile looked absolutely blood-curdled. In the next instant, the guy menacingly began to scramble up the stairs at a rapid pace. I jumped up in fright, and my body was finally able to move. That being said, there was nowhere to run. I hurried into the duty room, closed the sliding door, and pushed against it. After a short while, that eerie chanting song came from the direction of the stairs, and a strong fishy stench drifted over. Oh no, the guy is here. Crying, I pressed against the sliding door. Pup. My mind was going crazy. The guy walked up to the sliding door, and the image of his slimy head slamming against the door clearly appeared in my mind. Bang, bang, bang. He frantically slammed against the door, trying to break in. I was truly scared out of my mind, and I yelled loudly, "Please stop slamming it." At that moment, you could say I was crying and screaming like a madman. After I screamed, the slamming against the door stopped, and the eerie chanting song disappeared as well. I slumped to the floor, not daring to take my eyes off the sliding door. Then I kept backing up, retreating until I reached the back wall of the duty room. I leaned against the wall and stood up. When I stood up, there was a window right behind me. Although the crashing against the door and the eerie humming had stopped, I was absolutely certain that the guy was right behind the sliding door, because the bloody stench was 100 times stronger than before. For some reason, I clearly knew at that moment that the guy standing outside intended to smash through the sliding door on his next charge. I stared intently at the door and slowly opened the window. Suddenly, the guy violently rammed the sliding door. Almost at the exact moment the door shattered, I jumped out the window and leapt from the 3rd floor. The moment I fell, I looked up toward the room. The guy opened his large, crooked mouth right before my eyes, and then I lost consciousness before hitting the ground. When I came to, I was already in the hospital. I seemed to have been in a coma for several days. My arms and legs were fractured. My skull was cracked, and I was hovering right on the edge of life and death. My family was overjoyed to see me awake, but I noticed the nurse in charge acting very strangely. How should I put it? She looked as if she were terrified of me. Later, when my injuries had somewhat stabilized and I was preparing to transfer to a hospital closer to home, I asked the nurse why it felt like she was so afraid of me. She reluctantly told me that during the time I was bedridden, I seemed to be tormented by nightmares every day. But once it got late into the night, I would open my eyes, open my mouth, and happily sing a song. I curiously asked the nurse what song I was singing. The nurse hummed the song a little bit, and upon hearing it, my whole body began to tremble and cold sweat dripped down my face, because the song she hummed was the exact same chantment as like song that the flesh-minus colored guy was humming that night.